companies basically can market products to specific genders, and you can think of probably a lot of things that are marketed to either men or women. The issue that has become kind of a challenge for marketing is that we are no longer a two-gender market. Gender identification has forced marketing to make changes on how they promote and market products. And if you click on this link, you get some examples of some gender inclusive marketing that you can look over on your own, and just look at some of the different ways that commercials and ads and products themselves are trying to take the single male female gender out of some of their promotions and marketing and stuff, so that everyone feels inclusive on that. Income is the third demographic area that we want to look at, and the big thing about income to look at is disposable versus discretionary. Disposable income is the money you have left over after your taxes are paid. Is a lot of times what we call net pay. So if you get a paycheck, your gross pay, if you make $10 an hour, then that's your gross pay per hour. The disposable income is after the government gets their little fingers in there and takes their taxes out and stuff. So disposable income is typically going to be what your check is actually for. It's your net income. Discretionary income is then what you have left over after you pay all your bills. If you have rent, if you have food you got to pay for, gas for your car, insurance, all of those kinds of things that you would have to pay. Anything you have left over, I tend to call discretionary income your play money, because that's really what you use to buy items you don't need, luxury items, things like that. And so companies that sell products that are a want and not a need are really going to want to look at people with a pretty good discretionary income, so because they got to know that they have that money to be able to buy those kinds of products. When you look at education and income go hand in hand. Now, I'm the first one to say that I don't believe everybody should go to college, because I don't think that college is necessarily for everyone. And there are a lot of really good high-paying jobs out there that don't require a college degree. But the fact is, in history, in our country, the more education you have, the more money you tend to make. And so this chart just kind of gives you a breakdown of the average annual income for people holding these degrees. Professional degrees would be like PhDs, anything above a master's degree. It could be a specialist degree, things like that. That would be professional degree. If you're going to be, say, a doctor or a lawyer or a physical therapist or something like that, that would be a professional degree. And so you tend to go up your income the more money that you make. And so you could look at, if you go to the census.gov website, you could see and compare the communities of, like, say, Lee Summit to Independence. And Lee Summit has a much higher percentage of people that live there that have a bachelor's degree or higher than Independence does. And their average income is almost double what Independence's is. And so it just kind of, you can see that it goes hand in hand, education and income. Unless you're a teacher, then you don't necessarily make a lot of more money, but anyway. And then ethnicity is another demographic one. You could say ethnicity or race. And you can break things down. There are certain products, and the one I always use as an example is hair products, because that one seems to be really common. Hair products for African American hair versus the Caucasian hair. There's a difference in the textures. And so you can look at different things, ethnicity-wise, race-wise, that maybe one group of people might buy that another group of people might not. For instance, spices for Hispanic food, or things that you would make authentic Mexican food with, or Chinese food with. Those are our spices and stuff like that. If you were going to open a store selling those kinds of spices, you might pick an area of a city where there's a big concentration of that ethnicity. And so marketers look at things like that also when they're looking at where you're going to put a store, what new products you're going to sell, and that kind of stuff. And this just says these three groups account for 28% of the U.S. population today, and they'll be almost 38% in a couple of years from now. And then geographics. So we've been talking about demographics. This is geographics. Geographics is location. And geographics refers to basically ethnic concentrations in cities. So let's talk about geographics for a minute. Ethnic concentrations. The two pictures I have on here are Chinatown. This top one is in San Francisco and the bottom one is in New York City. But if you've ever been to either one of those, the one in New York City is really cool because it's like you're walking down the street and you're in the middle of downtown New York City with all these huge buildings, and you literally turn a corner and the street looks like this. And it's like you've just gone to China. And so a large percentage of Asian people in New York live in Chinatown, in or around Chinatown. And so that would be a good place for a company or a business to go if they have those types of products. Age is another one. If you think about places around the country, where do people retire? A lot of people are going to retire to Florida or Arizona. So if you go to Florida, South Florida, or Arizona, there's a lot of old people. For lack of saying that, I'm almost that age, so not really old, but that they retire because the climate is warm. And as you get older, you get aches and pains, and those warmer climates are better for your body. And so companies look at things like that. Income level. You can think about just places around Kansas City where there are different income levels of people. Again, like I said a little bit ago with Lee Summit. Lee Summit has a higher income than Independence does. And you could even go into like the Kansas City area and go into like Lenexa and different places like that where the income's even higher. And so if you drive down I-35 over on the Kansas side into Overland Park, Lenexa, you see a lot of car dealerships for like Lexus and BMW and all those really expensive car dealerships are over there because the people that live over there can afford to buy those kinds of things. And so those are all different kinds of things that you have to look at when you're trying to figure out who your target market is. Psychographics. Psychographics is your psyche. So it's your mind. And so it's basically wanting to look at lifestyle and attitudes and values and activities and different things like that you enjoy doing. So if you look at this example, this picture kind of compares demographics to psychographics, whereas demographics for this person here would be single, female, earns $200,000 a year, 36 years old, medical profession, where that's all demographic stuff. Then you come to the psychographic stuff, and those are the things that this person likes to do. They love dogs. This person could be me, except I'm not 36. NBA fan. They like to play listen to classical music. They go on vacations to an island or to a beach. Those are psychographic things that person enjoys. And so that makes a big difference because let's say that you want to open a store selling ski equipment for snow skiing. A couple of things that could go into that. Your geographics could go into that because you're probably not going to sell snow skiing equipment in Miami, Florida, because there's no mountains there. And you're probably not going to sell them to people who don't like to ski. So you probably, if you were going to do that, would go somewhere to a state like Colorado where there are mountains and where people ski. And so you can look at the geographics of that and the psychographics of it because skiing would be the psychographics part of that. Geographics and psychographics are pretty closely related, part of for the reason that I talked about a little bit ago of the concentrations of different groups of people. So you could look at the ethnicity, the psychographics, and the geographics. An example would be if you like to play golf, you might buy a house on a golf course. That would be geographics and psychographics together. And so this just kind of talks about some of the different places 55% of African American population live in the South in the United States. New York, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia. And then Hispanic markets would be like LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, and Houston. And then the last one is behavioral segmentation. And that is where you divide people into groups based on behavior patterns. So, for example, some people have a certain beverage you like to drink a certain time of day. I drink coffee every morning. So that would be a behavioral thing that I do. Hotels, airlines offer things for frequent flyers. If you are a traveler, you might get the companion pass with an airline credit card or something like that. Those are behavioral things. And if you'll click on here and watch this video, which is also linked in Canvas, that kind of explains it a little bit more to you about market segmentation. So when you're starting to create that profile and you're looking at segmentations, the first thing you have to do is look at the different segments, then select a market or product to study, choose the basis for how you're going to segment it. It's going to be demographic, geographic, psychographic. What is that basis you're going to be looking at? Gather your information, identify the market that exists, then use that information to choose the potential, which we'll talk a little bit more about market potential in a later lesson. And then you're going to look at who are your consumers, are there interests in the product or service, and then the money that they have available to make the purchase, because if your product's really expensive and they don't have a lot of that discretionary income, they're not going to be able to buy your product. And then what is your business's ability to communicate and distribute the product to them? So why is segmentation important? Because you've got to know your customers. It's that simple. You have to know who your customers are, because all of your marketing mix elements, not just the product, but the price you're going to sell things for, the location you're going to sell them in, the place part of it, and the promotion part of it has to be geared towards that market segment. If you're marketing to millennials, your commercials, all of the people you use in your commercials, all of the different things that you talk about and use are going to be different than if you're marketing to a baby boomer because of their differences. So market opportunity is an identified market with excellent potential. So you've identified them, you think it's going to be a good thing. So that pretty much wraps up that part of segmentation. In the next lesson, we'll kind of tie that in a little bit more with some of the other marketing stuff we've been talking about.